fellow aficionados. Winston Goodfellow here. We're in Irvine, California, at ground zero of Cars and Coffee. This is a place where the whole concept originated. Later today, we'll be speaking with the two, I guess we could call them the fathers. We're at the old Ford building where they had the premier automotive group. And this is the first Cars and Coffee that they've done in years. This time it's called Lincolns and Lattes because it's sponsored by Lincoln. And they've put together this hand-curated group of cars that's fantastic. So let's go get our minds bent. So when I walked in here, I knew that this had been curated, where they were just inviting certain cars. In the old days, it was bring what you've got. And people would show up, there was like 600 cars. And then as the area grew up around this, the locals started going, okay, that's enough. So they shut it down a while ago. And then, like I said, this is the first one they've done, I think, in 3 or 4 years. And so now it's Lincolns and Lattes. Boom. So they've got some lovely Lincolns. For instance, one of my faves is this 61 to 65 Lincoln Continental with the suicide doors. And what's interesting is Ferrari just came out with their new, I can't even call it an SUV because it's not, but the Puro Sangue. It has suicide doors, which I thought was really cool. They don't call them that, but that's what they are. So, yeah, so this is 61 to 65, somewhere in there. There's before that from the 50s. Yeah. Then we got the Continental from the 40s. And then we've got some Lincoln concept cars, which are pretty intriguing. I'm not quite sure how this relates to what I think of as Lincoln, but they've got something going on. And so it's funny, we were talking about doing a road trip upcoming. And the idea of all of us piling into a Lincoln Navigator has great appeal. So, hey, Lincoln, I may be giving you guys a call. But this is just kind of wild stuff. You know, looking at this. Hey, Mrs. C.
Hi.
Linda, do you know what this thing is? Well, I can see that. But, oh, okay, this is the Model L100. Okay, Model L100 concept. It's kind of interesting. And so now we're going to go over and look at some nice mind-bending stuff. And so we've got a car coming up around the corner here that when I say commendatore, you immediately think of Enzo Ferrari. And so, oh God, I was blessed to spend some time with this thing, oh God, a couple years ago. Bingo, here we have the Isdera Commendatore. This to me is one of the coolest cars from the 1990s. So you've got a teardrop shape, which is now becoming in vogue. We've got a Mercedes V12 in back, 6-speed transmission. The chassis on this car is fantastic. I fit in it just fine. We have our interesting periscope roof that actually worked kind of well with a mirror there. And so back in the day, this was a contender for one of the world's fastest cars. 93 is when this debuted. And depending upon the engine, it was quoted top speed was up to 230 miles an hour. This is a one-off. One of the coolest cars in the 1990s. And so right next to it, we have a Bugatti Veyron, which in the 2000s, this was fascinating because I remember when these came out, this moved the benchmark considerably. And so the first time I drove one of these, it was like I went 200 to 300 miles before I put my foot fully in it, because I'd driven a lot of fast stuff and I knew this was a quantum leap above it. And then what's kind of crazy, so then if we go right next to that, you've got the Myers Manx, which is the original dune buggy. And so back in the 60s, this was kind of a cool thing. And then we have the Ford 021C, which was a concept car that was done basically to, it was kind of an experiment in packaging. So, you know, and then now we're walking back down by the Bugatti. And then you've got the current generation Ford GT. You know, and then we've got an RS, pretty tweaked. Previous generation Ford GT. And then Real Deal Cobra, and probably a Gurney Eagle. Yes, that's what we've got. And so when I'm looking around here, here's our 2005 Ford GTs. Then we go back to the 1960s. Here's a Ford GT40 Mark II. That was the road car of the race cars. And then what may be the coolest car here is next on the left of the Ford GT is we have the Lola Mark 6 GT. This is Lola Mark 6 GT number 1. And it's owned by Alan Grant, who was a Shelby team driver back in the day. Alan's a super good dude. We'll be spending some time with him in the future at some point. This was the starting point of the whole Ford GT40 effort, was this. And so Ford back in the day teamed up with Eric Broadley, who was head of Lola. And so they started experimenting with this. And then from that came the Ford GT40 that a lot of you know from the movie Ford versus Ferrari. And speaking of Ferrari, on the opposite side of the Ford GT, we've got, this is probably a 250mm, I'm guessing. And this is great stuff. This is like 1953, 54. You've got your classic Berlinetta fastback style. Then we've got a 250 TDF standing for Tour de France, which was a race that Ferrari dominated back in the day. Then on the other side of that, we've got custom coachwork Alfa Romeo with a Ghia body, and I believe that's a one-off. This is a fantastic car, lovely restoration. That was up at Pebble Beach. Let's see what else we've got. So, continuing our walk. I mean, this is crazy. When you just go around here, and it was dumping rain yesterday, and then thankfully the rain let off. And so they were going to have 280 cars. They weren't sure how many were going to show up. And then boom, the rain stopped. And so most everything did show up. We've got another Cobra, small block. Then we've got the current generation Ford GT. And since we were talking about Lincoln and Lattes, let's go look at some Lincolns. And so this is kind of Ford Lincoln row here.
Pleasure meeting you.
Lovely Mustang 2+2. I had one of these back in the day. Mine was not a K code, meaning a 271 horse. I think it was an A code, 4-speed transmission, had the pony pack instrumentation, which was fun. And then 66 GT350, same here. Another 66 GT350, classic Shelby colors, the white with blue stripes. And I go over here, we're looking at some Lincolns. And when I think of Lincoln, this is really Lincoln for me. You know, kind of the John F. Kennedy type era. And I've always wanted one of these, a sedan or a convertible, wouldn't matter. Back in the day, I almost bought one. It was great because I took it out for a test drive. And then when the test drive was done, I took it back to the guy and I just said, dude, your car's borderline dangerous. You really need to get some work done on this. And so then you get into, like, I don't know how many of you remember the television show Cannon. And so this is kind of like the Cannon Barnaby Jones era type of Lincolns. Okay, going back over here, Ford GT with what's called Heritage/Gulf colors, which is based on, back in the day, there was a Ford GT40, and I'm not going to go too technical here, that was basically really, it was called a Mirage. Chassis number 1075 wore those colors because it was sponsored by Gulf. Won Le Mans twice, 1968, 1969. Chassis 1075 won Le Mans. Very, very, very few cars have won Le Mans twice. So another GT350, modern GT500, 760 horsepower for those that need it. Cobra with a hardtop. Okay, this is Superformance. You know, boom, here's kind of Cobra row. I personally prefer the small blocks, better balanced car, and I really like it when you have the slab side body so you don't got the big fenders. How cool is this Lincoln? I mean, look at the friggin' colors. You know, there's period colors. How crazy is that? Not what I'd want in my garage, but it's still kind of interesting. This ain't doing that much for me. Kind of the cross-side look. This Continental. That's just, there's a lot of stuff going on there. And then it just became so much more cleaner and classic. Jumping back over to here, this Cobra was friggin' bitching. Because this thing, I love just the unrestored feel of this. And these Cobras here, this is really kind of what I like because you have the slab side. You don't have the big fenders. You know, we've got one pipe out here. This one's probably got them coming out of the rear. Yep, you've got the dual pipes in the back. Oh, this is an early car. His license plate is telling me this is CSX 2023. He's referring to the chassis number. So basically, this would be around the 23rd Cobra made. And so this guy, our green car, great license plate, Hess, which is kind of fun. And then it looks like we've got a hot rod T-Bird next to that. This is probably going to be a more modern Cobra, you know, with the side pipes. Here's your classic 427 style Jesus.
Oh, yes. Sorry. It is a kissing cousin of what's on your front. Yes, exactly. So yours?
Yeah, so if you needed to haul the kids back in the day, 390 cubes would do it pretty well. Lots of torque there.
Yeah, I like that.
Jesus. 427 stuffed in this mother. Oh, God, and then look what's next to it. Holy Toledo. Almost walked by it. So earlier this year, we did a video on the Dual Ghia 400, which was a one-off. Prior to that, there was a car called the Dual Ghia, which was this. Here's your ultimate Rat Pack car. I just, for some reason, these just give me a real charge. 1957. Just look at this thing. Look at the colors on this. Look at the shape. Was financed by a guy out of, if I'm remembering correctly, Indianapolis, named Eugene Casserole. Very successful. Well, in the back in the day, we would often call entrepreneurs industrialists, and so he was one of those. Loved rigging cars. Had cars he raced at Indianapolis, and then he wanted to get into the car game, and he just didn't want to get in the car game normally. He wanted to really jump in, and so he wanted to do his own GT car. And so, boom, the end result was this, which was based on, God, without going off onto down Geeky Road, Chrysler Dodge back 53, 54 did a series of one-off concept cars. It ended up with one called, it was the Firebomb. They did Fire Arrow 1, 2, and 3, and then there was the Firebomb. Casserole saw that and said, boy, I really like that. From the Firebomb came the Dual Ghia. And I think I've got my chronology there right, just doing this off the top of my head. Excuse me, gentlemen. And then next to the Dual Ghia, this is what's so much fun about it, good cars and coffee, particularly one that's been curated like this. You have this fantastic 70s Bronco. And yeah, I'm assuming this thing is restored. You know, we've got our tachometer in here, so there might be something going on under the hood, but this is, I love the look of this. And these things are bringing, when you get these Restomod versions, and they've got more modern stuff, more modern looking stuff on it than this. But this is just so classic period looking. That is fantastic. Careful there, bud. Ben's doing a fantastic job of bounding around plants. You guys didn't see this, but behind the scenes, he actually did a 360 jumping in the air as he tripped over a plant, and he never saw the camera move. That's why he's my man. Okay, so then we're kind of wandering down here. Nice looking C8 Corvette. Boom, we've got the new Bronco here. Ben's got a real hankering for one of these. But you want more of a two-door rather than the four-door, right? Okay, he's kind of giving me the, he's basically saying, I'll take any of them. I can't argue. I kind of like this with the colors. Boom, we've got some interesting Ferrari stuff going on here. Boy, when I saw what looked to be this P3, P4 roll-on in, so Ferrari race car 66, 67. This was actually used in the movie Ford versus Ferrari. If that was a real deal P4, I mean, what would the price tag be? 50 million? Question mark. They only made 3 or 4 of them. Then we've got a 275 next to it. This, in many ways, for me, this yellow 275 here, is, you get an alloy-bodied one of those. I still think an alloy-bodied 275 4-cam. So it's got the 300 horsepower V12. Is that may be still Ferrari's best road car. Next to it is a 250 Lusso, lovely piece done by Pininfarina. Next to that, we've got a Dino 246. Friggin' Dinos are going nuts in the markets right now. If you have the right combination of options on the Dino, I mean, look at how lovely that shape is. So the prototype was seen in 1965. Then the next prototype was seen in 66. Production prototype was 67. That was pretty much that shape, called the 206. And then they built the 206, about 150 of them, meaning 2-liter, 6-cylinder engine. Until 1969, then the Dino ran until 1974. Boom, we jump ahead 10 years. I kind of like this going from silver to silver. This Testarossa. big flat 12 engine in the back. These strakes on the side were kind of the rage when Pininfarina did this on this car. This was really a styling rage that people started putting on cars, regardless if it was there originally or not. And then Lamborghini even put strakes on the side of the car in the Anniversario edition of the Countach. Great colors on a Ford GT on this side. Lovely old Packard. I can't tell you the year of that. Yeah. One of my favorite hood ornaments is this. And that's why I could tell that was a Packard.
Yeah, well, I got your message. And
so, continuing along Ferrari Road. So, let's see what we got going on here. I mean, this is where I'm starting. This is, I believe, a 450. Is this a Speciale or something? And then we've got an F12 next to that. That one I did get right. The old classic 308 a la Magnum PI. And some point soon, we're going to do an episode on 308s where we'll do a deep dive into it with Steve from Exclusive Cars of Arizona. Great guy, good bud. I think you'll really enjoy that because it's good stuff. Back in the day, yellow Daytona. This was basically the world's fastest car in 1969 to 1973. I had one of these for 2 years, put 24,000 miles on it, friggin' loved it. Then 275 GTS. I've driven a 330 and a 365 GTS. I've not done a 275. I'm looking forward to driving that one of these days. Next to it is something that I want to drive even more, a Daytona Spider. I've lusted after Daytona Spiders for a long, long time. I mean, look at that shape. Made 121 of them. For those of you that remember the movie Gumball Rally, one of these was in it. And just a fantastic car, 355 Spider. 360 or 355 GTS. Drove all sorts of 355s back in the day when they were new. Good stuff. So then, looking over here, Rolls. We've got our little Rolls-Royce selection. So this is going to be, I think that's going to be Silver Cloud or Phantom. That's going to be a Phantom from probably the 1960s. Then you get into the pre-war stuff, which is not my specialty. Coming next to that, we've got a Bentley, and they made lovely custom coachwork in the 50s, late 50s and 60s, about up to about 65, where they were coupes and fastbacks and sedans and all this type of stuff that use this type of with that type of greenhouse, and then what you're seeing along the fender lines and some of the detailing. These things are very, very cool. And so then we're going along a couple more pre-war Bentleys up to Rolls-Royce Corniche. I'm starting to get a hankering. I hope one day to have one of these things. This to me would just be great fun for cruising around on those warm days with some buds. When Ben's not behind the camera, dude, let's go cruising in my Corniche. So, okay. I know, yeah. We're going to continue walking along. So here we're coming up, I believe, to, so we've got Italy Row here. Pantera looking nice, some big-ass wheels on it. We've got our Alfa Duetto with a boat tail, which is fantastic. Next to it is a Maserati Bora. This went head-to-head with a Countach and the Boxer. And if you drive a good tight one of these, it makes a friggin' Countach and a Boxer feel like an antique. These things, when they're dialed, is fantastic. Lancia Aurelia. This was kind of an it car in the early and mid 50s. Beautiful Pininfarina body on it. Looks like a Maserati 3500 GTI. Then we come up to an Alfa. This is 65 thereabouts. Oh, we're starting to see a string of the Alfa. The GTVs here. Then you go, so this is classic Giugiaro design. These two right here. So Giugiaro at the time, first half of the 60s, he was Bertoni's head stylist. And boom, we go right next to it. Before Giugiaro, there was a guy named Franco Scaglione, who was Bertoni's chief of design, who was the most flamboyant of the designers. He was really kind of the artist. Bang, this was one of his, the Sprint Speciale. And when you see the prototype of this and just how it looks entirely different, it's still the same, but it's more sleek. These things are pretty cool. Scaglione, for those of you that are into it, did the Alfa Romeo Bats, kind of a cool little Lancia. Here we've got TZ1, which is done by Zagato. And so a number of big boy collectors have TZ1s that also have GTOs. 250 GTO, and they refer to these as kind of GTO Junior. So I've never driven one of these, but I do have a standing invitation, and we're going to do that. Then we've got the 1900 SSZ, and if you look on top of this, you see these double bubbles. And so this was where this came from. I was talking with Elio Zagato, who was running the company back in the 1950s. He was one of the two sons of founder Ugo Zagato, and Elio told me they had this taller client named Nabokov, and he couldn't fit in the standard roof. And so they did, that's where the double bubbles originated, was to get client Nabokov into the car. And so then they found out that it also helped the structural rigidity. And so I'm looking at this Fiat here. Back in the day when these were new, there was a commercial on where there was this, my name is Rene Juliet, I'm the world's greatest living stunt driver. And he was this French guy, excuse my awful sounding French accent, I don't know what kind of accent that really was, but you get the idea. And they would show him out thrashing these things, jumping, trains moving, and all sorts of wild stuff. And so it was a pitch for Fiat, and he talked about how his favorite car in the movies to drive were Fiats. And then here's the Lambo you hardly ever see. This is a Lamborghini Espada, which was in 1967. Lamborghini did a one-off called the Marzal that really blew everyone away. And so then they kind of did a massive redo on the Marzal to make the Espada, which was first shown in 1968. This was designed earlier. We were talking about Giorgetto Giugiaro being head of design at Bertone. This was done by his successor named Gandini, Marcello Gandini. And so this was real avant-garde. And so like from 68 to 78, this was probably the world's 4 fastest seats. And at speed, they're a really nice drive. I've done over 100 miles an hour on one of these, and it's set down on the road. You're sitting in it low. There's a lot of space. You've got the low greenhouse. It's just a very, very cool piece. They did 3 series of these, if I'm remembering correctly, 1,300, 1,500, something like that between the years. Then we go to a later Alpha, some more GTVs, another Sprint Speciale, and then we've got some more GTVs, and then probably an Alpha 2000 after that. So we come on this side, Ben, and just do, okay, boom. So, nice looking Beamer. And let me see if we can see around the back which model exactly we've got going on here. And, that's right. These things are called the Bavaria. I'm thinking, okay, no, it's not the 2500, it's not the 2800, it's the Bavaria. That's right. You could get these in the U.S. with automatic or a 4-speed. But mine had a 4-speed. Next to it is 3.0 CSL. I just love these 3.0 CSs. And the CSL was basically a lightweight version, hopped up a bit. And then the production car that you could get was the 3.0 CS. 3.0 CSL was done for homologation for racing. Oh, awesome. 2002 turbo. This was one of the first applications of turbocharging technology in the automotive industry. Just going off the top of my head, the first production car to use turbocharging was probably a Chevrolet Corvair. Again, not sure, but these things are a friggin' riot. And back in the day when you were on this, it was the classic 1002. Oh, and then we got to take a look at the BMW M1. Earlier we were talking about Giugiaro as head of design at Bertone. He also did the M1 when he was at his own company, Etel Design. And so wandering along BMW Row here, then I got to stop here because we come up to a Glass 3000. And so this had a 3-liter V8, was done by a manufacturer in Germany called Glass. Is a real interesting piece. And I can't tell you how many of these were made, probably 1964 to 67. I mean, look at this instrument panel, Ben, when you get a chance. This is just bitching. Look at this interior. How freaking cool is this? And so BMW ended up buying the company. They took it over. The design was done by Pietro Frua, an Italian coach builder. Frua also did some Maseratis, like the Quattroporte, and then the 5000 GTs. And you can see kind of going back and forth of design cues on all those cars. Okay, so here we are rattling on about all these exotic Italians and stuff. Bang, so we come to this BMW. And so the technology to do this front opening door and this whole car model was originally done by Iso in Italy, who later became known for the Iso Revolta, Iso Grifo, and some high-end GT cars. And so this was the brainchild of Renzo Revolta and a dude named Preti, who was his chief engineer on it. And so everyone's kind of going, what's up with this door that's opening at the front? That was actually done for practicality purposes because, by the way, behind the scenes, Ben's doing a friggin' fantastic job where you aren't seeing the camera moving. He's standing here on one leg doing this as he's adjusting his shoes. I'm very impressed, young man. So back to our story. So in the 1950s, Renzo Revolta, a very successful industrialist, was in motorcycles. He said, you know, we should really make something for, as people were becoming more affluent after the war, where they are covered from the elements. And so the car they did was the Isetta, which they then ended up licensing to BMW. And it saved BMW and it saved Iso at the same time. It's an interesting thing. But this whole idea, Renzo could foresee that you had these old cities in Italy, and so they couldn't build any more roads in the city itself. And so as they were becoming more crowded, the idea was you would pull straight up to the curb with a car, open the door, and then just walk out. So you didn't have any issues with possibly getting hit by traffic or anything like that. Boom. And then because the car's pointing straight in, you could park more of them rather than parallel parking as we normally do. So that was the idea behind that. And so BMW did bigger versions. And then you can see there's a door in the back. And so this is going to be a 600 or something later. And then you go to the real early BMWs. I mean, it's so crazy when you think BMW started with this, and then they ended up doing something basically 50 years later, 60 years later with Giugiaro and the M1. So, yeah, and then the 328. So is that a 327 or a 328? Let's take a look. Let's see if we can figure it out. Anyhow, so a 328. I've never driven a 328. But those that, some buds that have had 328s say it may be the world's best pre-war car because it drives like a post-war car. So, how are we doing on time?
5 minutes.
Fine. Okay, we're going to speed up our flying lap. We'll go cruising through the jungle here. See, this is what's so funny because we come walking out here. And so this was the influence of Italian design. Boom, TR6. Looks like we've got a TR4, probably a TR4A next to it. Boom, those are all Michelotti designs. So Giovanni Michelotti, Italian designer, did those. And then here's a real rare bird. A Panther is next to that. And so this was kind of retro styling. This was done in the 70s and maybe into the 80s, maybe. And it was, and so it's got the old styling. At first I thought it was a Morgan. I thought, oh no, that's a Panther. Then here's the Mini. For those who want weird history, this was the inspiration for the Lamborghini Mira, was the Mini. And so we'll have to get into that at some point. Looking along Mercedes row over here, you know, going from kind of new to old. This was interesting because we have this E60 over here. I'm not quite sure what that thing is. Does it have a V8 or a V12 in there? It might be a 6-liter V8, probably mid to late 90s. I'm guessing that's a cool piece, the SL next to it. And then it looks like we've got, I was going to assume that's a Maybach. No, it's not. It's, or maybe that's the new Mercedes Maybach. And then here's Ben's favorite. He loves these AMGs out there. When Ben mints the fortune, boom. This is the first thing that's going in the garage. They're pretty cool pieces. And they're spiking in price. And we've got a 190 SL, then these old 220 Mercedes. These are really prevalent back when I was a kid. Looking back over that way, we've got MG. We've got our MG. We've got a Bug-Eye Sprite, Lotus Cortina. Fantastic car. Super 7, Austin Healey. These are lots of fun. The Jag SS100. This is going to be a contender for potentially our most valuable car here, which is the Jag C-Type, TR250, Michelati design. Oh, this is kind of cool. So, how are we doing on time? Should we? Yeah. Okay. We're going to do, boom, we're going to zip around this way. We'll do a real quick walk along Jags and Porsches. And then I'm checking our phone. There's, okay. Because we're past 10 o'clock. So, okay, guys, we're going to have to cut this shorter than I would like. So we've got some lovely Jags, the XK 120s, 140s, the E-Types. These things are really nice drives. The E-Type was really a quantum leap for Jaguar. XKs were cool too. Hollywood said really went after XKs. And then it's funny because here's potentially your original sports sedan. These 3.4 and 3.8s and Jags, late 50s, early 60s. Another Triumph. There's our classic Morgan. We've got some more Triumphs and Austin Healey's over here. I mean, this is just, it's great stuff. And it's interesting because when you drive an Austin Healey and then compare it to a Fiat or an Alfa of the day, they're entirely different driving experiences. And then we're going to cruise over here to what's many people's favorite Marque, which is Porsche. And I'm immediately going towards like this 930 turbo. It's just, and the 928, this is something I want to drive. Never done it. I mean, this was basically Porsche's Corvette. And so we've got a number of 356s. Some of these look like outlaw cars like this. This is interesting. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Boom. Oh God, then we've got French stuff on this side. We got to come over and look at this. So this little mother right here, the Matra Bonnet D-Jet, this is the world's first mid-engine production car. Was this? A lot of people think it was done by a marque called ATS. It wasn't. This preceded the ATS by about 6 months. And so then we've got some Citroens, and then you've got the SM, which was car of the year in 1971. This thing was so technologically advanced. Air suspension, Maserati V6 engine in there, 5-speed transmission. When we go sometime in the future, we're going to be heading up to Wisconsin to do some filming up there, and we will probably be playing with an SM, and I'm very much looking forward to it. And then we get into classic racing, Porsches 904s, bang 904 there, and then what looks to be 906s. You've got a long tail, which now references, God, what a great way to reference the commendatory that we started everything with. Because there you see the long tail as it was used in competition. And it just was never did the transition to the road. And so Eberhard Schultz, who was the guy behind his Dara, he took that whole concept because he was going for top speed. And so he went with the long tail, which I thought was the coolest thing. And now you're starting to see it come about. You've got the McLaren long tails, you've got the speed tail, you know, there's just, and then Bugatti came out with their long tail thingy. And so Schultz was ahead of his time by about 25, 30 years. And some, see, then I'm looking at it, when I see 914s like this with the wide fenders in the back, it's like, okay, what's going on in the engine compartment? And some more lovely 356s, some modern stuff. And so there you go. There's our quick flying lap around what was known as Cars and Coffees, but this year is known as Lincolns and Lattes. So aficionados, thanks so much for hanging in with us. And we will see you somewhere on the road and looking forward to it.